the new edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I'm your host, Jessica Vaughn, and today we have another special guest. With us today, we have Erin Aebel, who is a co-founder of the group, the Surly Feminists for the Revolution. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm very happy to be here.
So before we kind of jump into the group that you co-founded and now has a lot of different members and admins because it's become very reflective of our community, tell me a little bit about life before election 2016 and your background.
Well, I have to be honest because I have a lot of respect for people like you who've been activists your whole life. I was always a voter and always informed in political stuff, but I was busy raising my kids with my law practice. Mm-hmm. And so the few years leading up to Trump's election, I did try to get a little involved in local politics and, did some fundraisers for various candidates. But I really didn't get substantially involved until the 2016 election. The only thing that I did as a volunteer was I was a poll watcher for the last two presidential elections because I was very concerned about voters' rights.
Well, that's pretty involved. I mean, hosting fundraisers and voting in every election and being a poll watcher. So you're a lawyer.
Yes.
Okay. What kind of law do you practice?
I practice business and health law. So I'm like a general business lawyer within the healthcare industry.
Oh, wow. And you have two children?
Yes. I have Lillian, who's 13, who's doing a play today. She's very involved in the arts. And my son, Beau, is 11, and he likes computers, math, and baseball.
They're adorable, by the way.
Thank you.
And so the 2016 election happened. Walk me through the process of waking up the next morning and then deciding that you were what you felt like, how you were going to get involved, and then how this group formed.
Okay. Well, I had volunteered all day as a poll watcher, which I do think it's very exciting to volunteer as a poll watcher on election day. It's a very long day. You're on your feet for more than 12 hours. And then I went home and had dinner and was watching the returns. And I knew well before my husband did that this was not going well.
Right.
It was very shocking for me. And I literally cried on the bathroom floor. I couldn't stop crying. Right. And I've never had a reaction to an election because I thought it was going to be so awful for our country and for women. And I felt like women had been kind of punched in the gut. And so I literally was not feeling well. And I went to social media and I was trying to connect with other people. And I realized I went to work the next day. All the women in my office were depressed and I bought them all lunch and we cried over burgers. And then I started connecting with some of the women in the community. I had known Liz Lanier for many years. She's an absolutely wonderful person, wonderful lawyer. And we were just talking over wine with a few other women in the area, mostly lawyers. And I said, we should connect via social media. We could create a group. I came up with a name. Liz says, I'll form the group. And Liz is very handy with social media. So she put it together. And that's how we started.
So I remember briefly at the Women's March, I ran into my friend Carmen, and I think that she was with you. It was the first time that I had met you, and you were all wearing women's suffrage outfits, I believe.
That's correct.
So was that all part of it as well? You really felt like with the Women's March and with Donald Trump being elected that there was going to be an obvious attack on feminism, hence part of the name?
Yes. And also I took it a little bit from the nasty woman, the way they called Hillary Clinton the nasty woman.
Right.
I kind of did a play on that and did it the Surly Feminist. And I had known Carmen for many years and we reconnected we always were connected, but I connected her into the Surlys. And Carmen's very fabulous. She always when she protests, she always has some wonderful thing to wear. So I connected with that. But
it was awesome. It made a big impact. I remember that. I have some photos. Okay, so you and Liz were the original co-founders.
Yes.
And then, so you started this group. Did you have any idea that it was going to grow that fast? Or what was your original intention once the group started becoming larger than, let's just say, the group of people you were trying to keep in touch with? What did you see?
Well, at first, we just wanted to connect and kind of heal and talk about what happened because we felt so troubled. And then, but there was a part of me, I do have a background in marketing, business development, and social media. So I have some skills in that area. And so I said, I can use this to grow the group. And I also want to reclaim media.
Right.
I saw how social media was used against people in the last election. And I said, you know what? We're going to take our own media. We're going to connect people. I knew in my heart and in my mind, even though I'm not a professional Democratic strategist or an activist, that we needed a diverse coalition of people that had to come together, because otherwise we can't take our country back if we don't come together. And I can't just sit in my, my white suburban neighborhood in South Tampa and think that I'm going to get this done. I have to meet people outside of my comfort zone or outside of my areas and connect us with this common.
So you knew that going in.
I knew that on a very deep level. I don't know if I even discussed it as much with Liz, but my political instincts as someone who's not a professional political consultant was that this is what has to happen to take our country back.
Right.
That there was the Bernie supporters and the Hillary supporters and, the different groups, and the centrist Democrats and the moderate Republicans, we've all got to find a way to get our country back from the situation that's in right now.
We need a dire
situation. Yeah.
So you created this group. How fast did it grow? Because it's pretty large right now. So did you find that people immediately were searching it out and that they were responding to it, or did it kind of grow at a slower pace? I mean, how many members do you have right now?
We have close to 15,000 members, and we've been holding for a few months. In the beginning, like I said, I have some skill and background in social media.
Right.
And so I have a pretty good social media following anyway.
Right.
So I use that to develop the group myself from my personal contacts. And then I use my skills to promote the group and to get a bigger following. I also had, for a few months, once we got up to, I want to say 8,000, my CPA, it's funny, he's a Republican who hates Trump. And he switched from Republican to independent after the election. And we has a social media company. He said, Erin, I'll give you the social media company for free.
Wow.
And we can try to develop some way to promote the group a little more. Wow. And so he and I paid for some Facebook ads for a few months. We didn't continue to do it, but we did do it, and we grew by a few more thousand, and then we just grew organically. And right now, I'm not really promoting it as much to grow. I'm promoting it. I want to get good people in there, but I also don't want to be like a garbage disposal and take everybody in, because we've had to bring in other administrators and they do a lot of oh my gosh, the administrators are great that work in the group. They do it all for free. Right. And they try to manage the discussions in there. And when you try to make a diverse group and you try to create a diverse coalition, that's when you have some conflicts. It's not always like a big happy party.
It's absolutely not. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's important. And what I've seen, is so much growth happen within your group. And I find it to be really inspiring. I know that sometimes it's a bit overwhelming for people because there are hard conversations that are uncomfortable and people get passionate. And sometimes it's hard to watch that kind of stuff unfold without it feeling like it's affecting you. But what I've loved of it is watching you guys be committed to giving everybody a voice and really walking the walk as far as being an intersectional group, which is, something that we need to talk about when we talk about feminism, and grow. So tell me a little bit about starting it, and then, like you said, this diversity and those conversations that have happened and how your group has had to grow and change and meet that.
I think that many of us, myself included, have learned so much from the group. I can tell you, I didn't have a degree in women's studies.
Right.
I've always been passionate about women's issues and also passionate about diversity, but I didn't always understand what that meant.
Sure.
And I'm sure, I know and recognize I have my own internal biases and biases that I've had to recognize. And so I have learned so much from doing the group. So it's important. The biggest thing that I have learned, and best advice I could give other people is to just sit back and listen sometimes and be so careful with your words. We're not like, I used to use social media where people would just vomit words, you know, they would just say everything. We have very specific posting guidelines, and we have thoughtful discussions, and we have respectful discussions. We try to have respect. I can't speak for everybody.
Sure.
They get a little surly sometimes, but we try, and also recognize that people have different communication styles. People come from different generations.
Sure.
And so the biggest thing I've learned and the best advice I can impart is to sit back and listen to other people and really listen to them and make sure you're not talking over them. You're not ignoring their concerns.
Right.
And you're really listening. You may not agree with everything, but at least listen and don't talk over them.
Sure. So you started the group, and then you started having these discussions. And then you felt like between you and Liz that it was a lot to manage. So you started adding more people to help navigate the conversations that are having. And it seems to me like, and I could be wrong, that you specifically chose people who could help lend voices to some of the more challenging conversations that you were having.
Oh, absolutely.
That there seems to be some of the bigger topics. I mean, I'm sure there's so many discussions about so many different things, but some of the ones that I've seen that have been the ones that definitely are very passionate have been specifically about, obviously, race and how that intersects with feminism and what that looks like, as well as I've seen a lot with the Jewish-Palestine conflict that's happening
for sure
over in the Middle East. And it seems to me like what you guys have tried to do is embrace, the diversity and make sure that you have voices within your administration group that are reflective of those issues and can also, moderate from the perspective of being involved, firsthand in a lot of those conversations from their experiences. So I'm assuming that was a conscious decision.
Absolutely, it was. I consider it a high priority for us to not be all suburban white women feminists. If we really want to have a meaningful movement, we do want to have different voices, and that they make our group better having the different voices for sure.
Has it caused internal conflicts where you guys have had to grow and learn to work first as co-administrators and then be able to help encourage that within the group as well?
Absolutely. We've all learned and grown a lot. And also, other people haven't always been as comfortable with it. Like they come to me or Liz or somebody else said, what's going on here? Yeah. Why are these people saying these awful things? And it's too nasty in here. And I said, okay, well, I'm always try to be kind. I try very hard to be respectful of everybody.
Sure.
Like, look, if it's not your thing, you can go on the main page or go somewhere else and get your information. I mean, the practical part of me is that I want to take our country back.
Right.
So I have a more political goal, and Liz is very focused. I mean, she's very politically involved too, but she's very much focused on intersectional feminism and giving marginalized voices a platform, which is very important to her, and I respect that.
Yes.
So that's why we kind of, and then our other administrators have different voices that they want to have heard.
Sure.
So we try to do that, but I have to balance the nascent political organizer in me saying, I have got to get the message out to as many human beings as possible with, someone else saying, this person is creating problems in our group, let's kick him out. So I'm like, oh God, but that's a voter. So I have to I have to be practical about, at the end of the day, I respect what the other administrators do. And if the person is not being respectful in the conversation, they have to leave.
Right.
I hope that they stay engaged in the discourse that's going on in our country. I hope they vote. And some of those people are people I know that aren't in the group, but I know them in other contexts. So you just have to find the venue that's right for you.
It's incredibly challenging to have any sort of group, especially when you're advocating for so many different voices, especially if they're voices that don't reflect your experience, to make sure that you're doing it in a respectful way. It's a huge challenge. So I admire what you guys are doing, even though, sometimes it is in any group where there's a lot of change and growth, sometimes it is painful to watch how that growth happens. But I'm glad that it's happening. I think that you guys you're a huge voice in our community. I love seeing the conversations in there. So I want to talk about a couple different things as far as your involvement involvement in politics, because you're highlighting that's important and that's something that we have in common. And that's one of the reasons I do this show. And I also want to kind of talk about some current events that are happening right now that's going on, and also kind of your experience. I know that I've seen some posts from you where you've talked about, and we've talked about this kind of chauvinism that you've had or that you've felt. Specifically, it seemed like as you became more of an activist and as you became a louder voice for women and intersectionality, it seems like you've gotten some pushback from your coworkers as far as men. And we touched about that a little bit when I was on you guys' show recently. Tell me a little bit about what you've experienced as far as that's concerned.
Well, I'll tell you that in the political world, I have not had any pushback as a woman.
Interesting.
So far, so good. So far, but I know that I know that it exists, and
right.
I'm aware of it, and I've seen it in other contexts.
Right.
But I work in a mostly male-dominated field. But I do. The exciting thing is a lot of the younger women coming up in the are women, and women are doing very well in the law. They just still haven't gotten to the highest positions.
Sure.
I have gotten some pushback for my political beliefs in general. I will tell you, it has not hurt my business. It has helped my business, because I think that people pick a lawyer because they connect with them, and they're either going to connect with you or they're not.
Right.
And if you're someone who's true to your word and you're respectful to other people, you would hope that carries through. And so far I have, like I said, my business has only grown.
That's awesome.
So it hasn't hurt me.
So you feel like the chauvinistic things that you've felt have been more just business related, that you get a lot of pushback for being a woman in business? I get a lot of pushback from Republican men. They say, oh, well, you could be hurting your business, or why are you doing this? And I say, well, this is just how I am. You want, generally speaking, real business lawyers, I think in my profession, I think the best lawyers are the people that are holistically involved in the community. Oh, I love
yes,
that.
you do your work, and but you're warriors for justice, and you do your work for your clients, but you should be on boards, you should be volunteering, you should be out there. All these experienced lawyers tell younger lawyers, this is what you should be doing. But God forbid I do something on the political left.
Right.
Then suddenly that's like dangerous.
Interesting.
Because I feel threatened by Donald Trump and what's going on in our country. I actually think I'm doing a service to the country. I mean, I've never worked so hard for free in my life. And I know you feel the same way.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, that's the only pushback I've gotten has been from men, and in a partisan way. And I have to say, I have friendships with Republican women, and I don't get that pushback from them.
Interesting.
Which I find very interesting.
That is interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the goal for the group right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you talk to each of our administrators, we might have a different answer. But I think in the big picture,
right.
My goal, and I think I can speak for the other administrators in the big picture, is that we want to educate people on important issues.
Right.
And we want them to take the information and not just live online, go out and vote, but also go out and not just about candidates, but about the praxis, the policy in motion underneath what the candidates are doing, and making sure that we understanding the issues on the environment, we're understanding the issues with intersectional feminism, we understand Black Lives Matter and what needs to happen there. We understand how our government works. We understand the relationship between the school board and the Florida State Legislature as it relates to school funding. We understand judicial races on the local level all the way up to the Supreme Court. So it's education and understanding so that we can reclaim our media and create powerful voters.
I love that. That's exactly what the Progressive Caucus is trying to do as well.
We connect so well.
I know, right? Because it all comes down to education, because the more people know about something, the more empowered they feel and the more of an advocate they can be. So I think that, all of the groups, hopefully, whether they were involved pre-election or post-election, eventually kind of come to that understanding that education is power, and educating your members is the most empowering tool that you can give them. So I love kind of seeing that, outcome and that framework become the focus of each group individually.
I want people to think, and I don't want to tell people how to vote. I hate that idea of it. I want people to make up their own minds. I'm happy to give them information. I can tell them how I feel, but I want them to make up their own minds.
So you're saying, from what I'm hearing, is that, every administrator has kind of their own niche and their own motivation for staying involved in the group. And one that especially is important to you is the political side of it. So you've gotten more involved politically. And what does that look like, aside from necessarily working inside the Surly Fens, but you personally getting involved in politics and kind of your experience thus far in that arena?
Well, I'm doing it I'm doing and learning as I go. I did not ever attend any protests or marches until the Women's March. That was like my first time. Okay. And it is addictive, I can tell you, as you probably know because you've done this your whole life. I have attended the March for Science and the Women's March rally. And some of the other local events to highlight different issues in our community. Right. So I've really enjoyed doing that. I also spend time almost every week. I meet a candidate or two, and I ask them questions. I find out what they're about on all levels. I'm focusing right now on school board and judicial candidates because so many people go into the ballot box and don't know anything about who to vote for.
Especially judicial candidates.
I'm trying to do that. And then I'm trying to educate through my social media, personal and on social media. Here's what I think about these candidates. Here's some information. I try to educate people on districts. People don't know what their school board district is or their congressional district. Right. These things are very important to understand. Know your ballot long before you go in and how you're going to vote. Right,
because there are at-large seats. Sometimes you're voting for somebody who represents the entire county or the entire city, and then there's district-specific. So it is very confusing. Even myself, sometimes I get confused between my state senator or which level that's on. There's so many different people that represent you. It's hard to keep it clear in your head if you don't have a huge amount of time to devote to that. So I think figuring out a ways to chunk that information down to people so that they can really absorb it in small pieces is always a goal of kind of what I'm trying to do. That when you lay it all out in a large showing, that it gets confusing. So I really try to chunk down the pieces. And I kind of see you doing that too. And like you're talking about, you're micro-focusing on specific races or judge or school board to make sure that people have a holistic understanding of that.
I even know a lot of the districts that the Surly Feminists are in. And I'll refer people. I'm good at networking. And so I try to take those skills that I learned in business and I put them in the political field and try to put people together that can help each other. That's the other thing that I do is just knowing people that are involved in the community that can help each other.
Yeah. And sometimes that's just the most important part. And people think that, and I hear you kind of saying like, oh, I came to this new, or I'm learning as I go, or I didn't have this experience. Even though I was more of an activist, I didn't have any experience in the inside of politics until I just threw myself in there, and you do learn as you go. And so I think it is overwhelming for people because there's so much knowledge that you think you have to know to be effective, and really you don't. You just have to care and kind of start doing the work and you'll figure that stuff out. So as kind of getting involved with politics, because it seems like from watching from the outside, and this could be totally just my observation, which might not be true, but you kind of started, maybe like you said, being very excited about Hillary and hoping that she was going to be the first woman to win the race, and then feeling kind of sad that she didn't that she didn't win, that she lost. And maybe, not being as engaged and maybe being a little bit more moderate on some of the issues because, you work in an area where you're around a lot of people who are more moderate, and you live in an area where people are more affluent. And it seems to me like, aside from kind of this growth as far as being intersectional with your feminism, you've also had kind of a political growth to being more open and very passionate about progressive side of politics. And even so much that, you're interested in why is, social democrats so important right now, and kind of getting that holistic understanding of progressive politics. So it looks to me like, aside from, social growth, that you've also had kind of a policy growth as far as progressive politics. Would you say that's accurate? And kind of tell me about that journey as well?
I would say absolutely. Like I said, I've always been a solid voter. And generally speaking, my primary picks were more to the left and would never make like the presidential nomination. I finally got Obama and I supported Obama both times, and I was so excited. But Obama was good and bad, and Obama was mostly good, but he was bad in that he lulled me into a false sense of security, like so many Americans that we're all recovering from now, because we realized that we really aren't that secure. And I was not like I know I'm going to get crap about this, but I was not in love with Hillary Clinton, but I also didn't give much of the time of day to Bernie Sanders either. So I was kind of like in between, but I went with Hillary because I was like, I knew her. I said, okay, I know her. But I still was traumatized that she was not elected. I wasn't as passionate as an advocate as some of the other women I know were. And I feel, but what's really helped me is me being able to see all the different supporters and bring them together, because I feel for both of them. The Bernie Sanders supporters and Hillary Clinton. And as I had studied more in depth the progressive candidates, you're absolutely right. I went back to where I was in my youth, really, and also my learning about intersectional feminism and learning about the issues of marginalized people. It's made me be much more of a progressive than ever before. So, yes, I'm not a democratic socialist at this point, but I am I would describe myself as a very progressive Democrat.
Yeah, I see some of the things that you're saying, and you're on fire, and you're very passionate. And it's, to me, and one of the things that I always come back to, and it sounds almost like a cliche statement, but what I really believe and why I work so hard to stay engaged as a progressive in the party, which is an extremely uncomfortable place to be, is that progressive politics almost transcends partisanship.
It does.
And I've said that before, because I feel like when you take the fear and all of the, the propaganda out of the issues, and you connect with people on the human level, and you talk about what's holistically good for our society or our community or every member equally, that's pretty much what is the base of progressive politics, is advocating for everyone to have access to healthcare or education or social justice, where we're all treated the same by the law, depending, not depending on our skin color or our socioeconomic class or our gender identity or any of that, we're advocating for all of the members of our society equally, because we're all connected, and that benefits each one of us.
It's a focus on the substance and the honesty of the substance of the policies that affect people, and not what some political party is telling you to do. And that's where I also am focusing on this, not just because I identify with it, but I absolutely see it as the future. I have children. I know, I spend a lot of time with people younger than me, and I really see that as the future. And I hope it's the future. So,
and that's why I work so hard to try to drag the party towards the future, because I feel like if we're not embracing it, that's how we're going to lose out. I mean, when we're talking about taking our country back, it's like we have to start realizing what direction the youth and the majority of our country wants to go in, and not, just playing it safe by constantly, trying to walk down the middle and somehow tantalize these disenfranchised Republicans, instead of actually standing up for the base that we're supposed to represent and the people in our party that are the most vulnerable. And so, speaking of that, as of this morning, there was an issue that happened in Pinellas that there is actually a vigil for today, where there was...
Was it Clearwater?
It was in Clearwater. And there was a gentleman. Now, I might not have all the details of this correct, because it's still unfolding, but there was I use the word gentleman loosely. There was a man who was essentially had been really aggressively kind of taking over this, I think a disabled spot outside of a convenience store. And he had been super aggressive about it for a few weeks, and had been a problem, and had been harassing people who had been parking too close to it. And from what I've read of reports actually reported in the newspaper, he had been using racial slurs and been very aggressive towards patrons who were coming into the store. And he had been a known problem.
Right.
And then an African-American family came in, and I think they parked too close to his space. The father went into the store. The guy started a problem with the people in the car, and, there's turned out to be, an argument. And when the father came out of the store and saw that this man was aggressively attacking his family, he pushed him. And there's a video of him being pushed down to the ground to where that man, whose name I guess it's hard to pronounce, Michael Drejka, instantly pulled out a gun and then shot Marquise McLaughlin, who was the African-American man, and murdered him. And then because of this horrible stand your ground law that we have in Florida, the sheriff of Pinellas, Bob, I guess, Gualtieri. I'm really bad at all of these names. Said that this was enough evidence not to even arrest or charge this man with murder. And so there are lots of vigils happening today and protests that are happening. But for me, who now has gotten more involved on the inside of politics, what I'm wondering is, how do we affect this? Protests are great. I love protests. I spend a lot of times on the streets. I think they're important. They show the numbers and the power, and it's a good way of connecting with other people. But how do we affect change from the inside as well? As far as, I got a lot of feedback that we should be calling Bernie McCabe, who is the state attorney for Pinellas,
yes.
And asking and demanding that he pick up this case and press charges. And then, so there's almost two different parts to it. It's like making the elected officials, who are Republican gun-loving officials, elected officials, accountable, but then also changing this law. Because when something like this happens, I feel like people are so outraged and they're angry. But if they can't make it to the protests that spring up as they happen, they comment on it, they say, oh, this is unfortunate, but then there's no actual follow-through on bringing justice in these situations. So from your perspective as both a lawyer and then someone working to make change politically with a group, what would you say that we need to do in a situation like this to make sure that there's some justice in this case?
Well, I say we do all of the above, but I do have a more when I see something awful like this happening, like the man was not being threatened, and then he shot and killed someone and got away with it under the stand your ground law.
Right.
So when I do agree that we should have vigils. I do agree we should draw attention to it.
Yeah.
We should we should contact the state attorney. But my mind, that's just how my mind works, is immediately like, this is why I'm working to change the Florida legislature.
Right.
One of the things that I do with my donations, my time, my events is, I'm on the executive board of Ruthless, is try to get some better people in the legislature to change that law. The other thing we have to do is we have to pay attention to our local elections.
Right.
We elect the sheriff and the state attorney.
Right.
We have to know what their policies are, and we have to create relationships with them on the front end, and we have to hold them accountable. It's not enough to elect somebody. You have to hold them accountable. And you, as a progressive, I love that. I think that that's part of your, mission. Theory and mission as well, is to not say, we're not here to give anyone a free pass. They have to do what they say they're going to do.
Right.
And we really do have issues, and I'm glad that Black Lives Matter and other allies of Black Lives Matter are bringing attention to these issues that are happening in our own backyard.
Right. So here's something that I find frustrating, and maybe I haven't had enough time for it to pass, but when something like this happens in Tampa, the Progressive Caucus really engages our local party to try to get them involved in more of these social issues. Because once you start working in the party, you do kind of disconnect socially sometimes, and you become a party insider, and you start to really worry about policy and elections. And it's hard sometimes to put it on your radar to keep all of these, social issues tied to the policies and advocate for everything. You just can't be everywhere at one time. So I really try to be the voice pushing the party towards taking stands. Thank you. Taking a stand on these issues. So like when we had the Confederate monument issue, and that was a big issue, none of the people from the Democratic Party, it was on their radar. And of the Progressive Caucus, it was the first thing that we cared about. And we showed up at all the hearings. And then I tried to get all the other caucuses involved and to draft a response to it. And our chair, Ione Townsend, made sure that the entire county party got involved in this issue, and they drafted a release, and they said, they condemned the fact that there were elected officials who were trying to stop the removal of this so much that they ended up getting sued and doxxed and dragged into into the ray with us.
Yeah.
I'm finding it disappointing that I don't hear from the Pinellas Party, the Democratic Party, anything from them as far as this issue. And I've tagged like the chair of the party because I feel like as a party, when we're saying, and I have these conversations with everybody, how can we engage all these different community of colors?
This is exactly how we engage.
Exactly.
This is what matters.
Yes. We should be standing behind when there are people who are being murdered in the street for defending themselves and their murderers aren't even arrested. At the very least, our party should be taking a stand, condemning the fact that there are Republican sheriff and a Republican state attorney who are both gun advocates that are letting this person have a free pass on this, that this is our opportunity to show different communities that we're not just pandering for their votes come election time, that we stand with them even when things are uncomfortable or when people, regardless of who they are, need us the most. So in that sense, what do you think, what have you seen, what do you think that we can do to engage the party to take a bigger stance on these sort of things?
The Democratic Party needs to be involved as activists in the community, and they need to take a stand on all the local issues, and they need to be clear about it and have press releases and promote it. Absolutely. And you're exactly right. Nothing makes me more annoyed or angry. And I can imagine how many voters would be annoyed if you only show up in a community or with an issue when you need a vote.
Right.
You're doing this. If you're doing this to really serve the people, then you will show the voters who you are. And so and I think the party needs to do it and the candidates need to do it, people who, ultimately run for office. So
I think part of the disconnect is we have so many party loyalists that are afraid to get too involved in these sort of issues. And what I'm wondering is, because I've seen you kind of grow and work as an activist. I mean, you might not use that term, but that's what I would phrase it. And politically, but I haven't seen you really want to join necessarily or work with inside the party per se. Would you say that seeing some of those things come out of the party is one of the reasons that you might have reservations of working within the party? Or what do you think the disconnect is where you still work outside of the party?
Well, there's my opinion, and then also what I think is good for the Democratic Party, in my opinion. My opinion is that I can be most effective outside the party, doing the things that I'm doing I've been a lifelong Democrat, but I've not been in the party structure. I have a lot of opinions about what I think the Democratic Party needs in its own structure or not. I don't know. I'm certain not all of them would be welcome, but I do think they have a little bit of a image problem. Not saying it's. I love most of what the Democratic Party doesn't stand for.
Yes.
But I think that they could serve the communities that they're representing a lot better if they had better messaging on issues and not just on candidates.
Oh, I love that. I agree. Why do you think you serve the party better outside of it?
Because I have the freedom to do whatever I want to do.
So what I'm hearing then is that you feel that once you enter the party, and I'm not disagreeing with this because I could name 5 different reasons why I agree with you, that you become limited in your ability to advocate for issues that are important to you by the confines within the party?
I don't know. That's just my impression. I haven't been in there.
Sure.
And also, there's time limitation too. So I worry that I think I can be most effective. I do support the Democratic Party locally financially. I'm in the Hillsborough Society.
Yes.
I do go to the events.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it earlier.
Thank you. All right. So I won't beat you up too much about being in the party anymore. So let's talk about what you had said when you first came in, because we're getting close to running out of time. That taking back our media, reclaiming our media. So your group, the Surly Feminists of the Revolution, have taken over a time slot for, was it Mitch Perry on WMNF?
We are going to have rotating every other Thursday. We're going to have a show at noon on 88.5 WMNF. And we're very excited about that. And we're going to talk about feminist and political issues. I think that my co-founder Liz Lanier has a very exciting show coming up soon that'll be announced shortly. And then we're also doing some podcasts. So on the off weeks, we can have podcasts as well. But it is important. I love what you're doing with Reclaiming My Mind. And it really is that over the past week or two with the news of the Russian, which I think is just confirming what I knew to be the Russian interference with our elections and the way that the Russians had used cyber cyber attacks and,
fake
threats and fake news sources.
Right.
I really think it's incumbent upon every American citizen to take control of their media and their information and be really sure that they're comfortable where they're getting it and do more research and listen to some alternative sources.
Yeah. So I love the term reclaiming our media. And so I love the fact that you are having a show. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest. I had a great time on the show. And I love the fact that we're talking about media and how important that is, because what I find is, and I say this all the time and I said it on your show, sometimes I sound like a broken record, that it's impossible for people to stay engaged locally because unless they have the time, they don't know what's going on. I mean, the media covers everything on a national level so much, it's impossible to tune out. You go to a doctor's office and they're telling you what's happening on the national level. You know, any waiting room, it's impossible. But there's nothing that tells you what's happening locally, except for maybe a handful of things. And a lot of times they're consultant run and they have a bias and they're not fair journalism.
Exactly.
So trying to find something, and I'm not saying that I'm not biased sometimes.
I'm very open about my bias. You know exactly where I stand.
I definitely have a commitment to progressive politics. So if you're a moderate, you might not like what you hear on the show. Not even a moderate, but someone who doesn't necessarily agree with progressive politics. So I want to move on quickly because we actually did get a question. And I love when listeners ask us questions. So a listener said, as a lawyer, and I wasn't familiar with this, maybe you are, you might not be, but as a lawyer, what do you think about Article 4, Section 2?
Oh my gosh.
And she included the sentence. So that says, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in several states. The writer says that their liberal mind thinks this sentence upends the state's rights ideology. If one state protects abortion to the fullest extent, are we all entitled to that privilege? If one state abolishes the death penalty, are we all entitled to that privilege? Are we all entitled to the privilege of the laws from the state that has the best environmental protections? So I guess that's kind of a question regarding state rights based versus federal rights.
Can I look at your notes? Wow, I didn't see that one before. Well, I have to tell you that my worst grades in law school were constitutional law and that I do not practice in constitutional law. But this is a very interesting question. And maybe it's something that we're going to have to look at closer with, kind of what's going on with the federal law and the U.S. Supreme Court.
I think that's what's prompting it. Yeah, as people are starting to, I think what people are seeing in the future of this country right now is that a lot of what Donald Trump is putting into play is that states will have more authority, especially like in the abortion situation, to kind of dictate their own law and what that's going to look like. Because although we've had that before, maybe not as strongly as we have. And is that going to cause, eventually is that going to cause more of a civil war? Are we going to be looking at people moving to different states to try to, figure out, if those states are reflective of their basic human rights. So I think it is something
This is really interesting. I honestly haven't thought about it before, but it's funny that in the Republican narrative that you get, we're just going to let the states make up their mind, unless it's not what we don't want them to make up their mind. And then we certainly don't want the municipalities to have any of their own opinions because they're very liberal, those municipalities. So it's funny, Right. But no, I'm going to take a note of this, and I will look at this issue more closely, and maybe on my social media or as well personally, and in the Surly Fems, if I find out some more some reading on Article 4, Section 2, I will certain to follow up and hope that I can get an answer to this.
All right. Well, thank you, listener. You started a good conversation that hopefully we'll follow up more on, because I think we do need to start talking about state rights versus national rights. So, kind of in closing, is there anything that you want to tell our listeners about ways that they can get involved, or if they want to personally contact you, or things that you're doing where if people are really motivated, they can help?
Sure. Well, if you're interested in the Surly Feminist for the Revolution, you can look us up on Facebook and ask to be added. You have to answer questions. And I really highly recommend that you review the very detailed posting guidelines before you post or comment on the page. And we have a national conversation in there as well as local events. We have an events tab where I have a book club where every month this is a thing I did to help people connect on more, on one-on-one smaller basis to discuss the issues of our day in feminism and in politics. We're reading the book, What the Eyes Don't See, about the Flint water crisis. And it was written by a pediatrician who was an Iraqi immigrant. And I'm about halfway through it. It's an incredible book. And it shows all the problems of like, how did this city, how did they get lead in their water?
Right.
How did this happen?
Yeah.
What are the steps how did people not focus on this? How did the EPA not pay enough attention?
Right.
It was very eye-opening for me. So we can discuss those types of issues in the book club. And then the other thing is I just have my main Facebook page. You're welcome to contact me if you have questions about anything. I have a lot of opinions on different candidates. I know, like I don't tell people how to vote, but I have my own opinions I'm happy to share.
Are there any candidates that you've met with recently that you feel super passionate about, or that you have had a great connection with?
I could talk about a few. I mean, there's so many. I must have met with, I want to say more than 30 candidates personally this year. And I'm very excited about so many of them. I think Ruth's List has a great, a lot of pro-choice women who are running for office, and particularly in the state legislature. I'm very excited about the opportunities for state legislature, but I'm taking a 10-year view because I know that in this election, there's going to be some winners, and not everybody's going to win that I want to win. Sure. But I'm going to keep on trying.
Awesome.
And then locally, I'm very excited about some of the, I'm going to say his name wrong, but it's Rob Pahachak. He's a teacher at my daughter's school, and I spent some time with him. He's running for the countywide school board race, and I don't know. I don't want to say anything about any of the other candidates because I haven't met them. Right. But I was very impressed with him, and I hope he wins.
Awesome. And what about in the governor's race? Do you have a preference?
Well,
in the governor's race?
I do. I feel bad because I want to support women. I would say that Gwen Graham's my second choice, but Andrew Gillum is my strong first choice. I connect with him very, very well. And so, I hope I think it would be a real watershed change for the state of Florida. Right. And if he were to win the nomination, I think it would blow the top off of Florida politics.
So first you'd have to get out of the primaries.
But yes, out of the primaries, and there's a lot of people running in the Democratic
There are,
race.
And not a lot of people participate in our primary process. They don't know about it, or they're not registered to vote as a partisan.
But this is what I keep telling people. I keep telling people that if you even if you're independent and we could actually change the face of Florida by getting progressive voters out, or any voters that have an opinion on who they want to see on the Democratic ticket. We could change that. We could also make a huge difference locally in the school board elections and in the judicial races, which are next month too. Don't forget, even if you're not in a registered with a party. Right. And I can't talk you into registering with a party, which I'm trying to with everybody.
Because it's so easy now. You can do it online.
You can do it online at the Supervisor of Elections office. You can vote on, and I know in Hillsborough County, you can vote on judges and on school board members. Right. And I have a lot of opinions on those too.
And there's a runoff. So if one of them
Exactly.
doesn't get over 50%, then they'll pick the two highest voter or the two highest candidates who get the highest votes, and they'll go on the November ballot. Also, there might be some referendums on there if we can get the transit one, if that one gets enough signatures.
Yes.
Do you know, I think it's 9 or 10 days that people have left if they do want to help.
I know it's coming up very
nominate
closely.
If they want to participate in nominating good Democrats, they have to change their partisanship right away, and then they can always change it back.
That's what I tell people. And a lot of people in the Surly Feminists have described that they do that they're independent voters.
Right.
They lean progressive. And so they register within the deadline, they vote in the primary, and then they undo their registration later, because this is just the nature of our law that we have to deal with.
Right.
You know, so
well,
until we can change it.
Progressives are trying to change that, but it's an uphill battle. Well,
Yes.
Thank you so much for driving across town, for sharing your thoughts with us, for all of the work that you do, for staying engaged. It's an exhausting experience sometimes, growing and pushing for change. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you'll come back and have more talks later on. We always invite our guests back. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions or feedbacks, you can always email me at jvaughn, V as in Victor, AUGHN, the number 30 at gmail.com. If there's stuff you like, if there's stuff you don't like, if you want to ask our guests a question, we encourage you to let us know and touch base about anything you like or don't like about the show. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you have a nice evening.